And welcome to the City of Dublin Planning and Zoning Commission. You can join the meeting in person at 5555 Perimeter Drive and also access the meeting via the city's live stream on the city website. We welcome public participation, including public comments on cases. At this time, if you'll stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Welcome, Ms. Beal. Would you please call roll?
Yes. Mr. Snair?
Here.
Ms. Call?
Here.
Mr. Grimes?
Here.
Mr. Way?
Here.
Mr. Fishman?
Here.
Mr. Supelak?
Here.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. At this time, I am looking for a motion to accept tonight's documents into the record. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Beal.
Mr. Supelak?
Yes.
Mr. Fishman?
Yes.
Mr. Way?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Yes.
Mr. Snair?
Yes.
Ms. Call?
The Planning and Zoning Commission is an advisory board to City Council when rezoning and platting of property are under consideration. In such cases, City Council receives a recommendation from the Commission. In other cases, the Commission has the final decision-making responsibility. Anyone who intends to address the Commission on any of these administrative cases must be sworn in. There is one case eligible for the consent agenda this evening. It is Case 2, Nouveau Church at 4199 West Dublin Granville Road, 22-024, conditional use. Is there anyone on the Commission who wishes to pull this from the consent agenda?
I would just like to ask. Sorry. All right, here we go. I drove the site today, and as I said in this, there was some cleanup as far as landscaping, but when you drive around the back, it's a mess. There's big panels back there, there's stuff, and also Oakland's got a lot of stuff stored. I don't know exactly where the boundary line, but it's on the parking lot, and I wonder if we can make that a condition that before it's occupied, that's cleaned up. Some of it's a little dangerous if kids are running back there. It's, you know.
Ms. Mullinex, can you answer the question just as far as what the procedure is from here according to the property boundaries? What would be included?
Absolutely. So in the rear yard, there is a grease dumpster that is back there, as well as a couple metal panels, miscellaneous debris and trash, as well as some outdoor storage from Oakland Nursery that is crossing the western property boundary line.
So we can make that condition, that gets all cleaned up before it's occupied as a church. I just think it could be dangerous if kids were back there.
Could I interject? We have policies and procedures and rules in place where certain criteria have to be met, and that's typically one of our criteria. Is there a need for further conditions, or do our current rules and conditions, as far as administratively, do those cover the situation that Mr. Fishman is addressing?
Yes, and we can add a condition as part of the consent agenda approval.
Okay.
Well, I would just recommend, given the existence of existing procedures to handle the cleanup, and already there is a condition specific to the grease dumpster being removed, that my recommendation would be not to add any further conditions to the motion.
So it's covered. Your concern is covered in the current requirements and the additional condition that's already on the item.
But when I read it, it didn't say anything about when it would be done. It just said they'd work with staff to make sure it's cleaned up. I just would be concerned that for kids' safety and stuff, that it would be done before it's occupied as a church. Is that a problem?
All of the conditions, as well as site compliance, would have to be met before it's finally occupied.
Okay, great. That's fine. Okay.
All right. Seeing as Mr. Fishman's concern is mitigated with the existing requirements, does anyone wish to remove this from the consent agenda pending further discussion? Seeing none. Moving on, just continuing rules and regulations. The agenda order is typically determined At the beginning of the meeting by the chair, the rules and regulations of the Planning and Zoning Commission state that no new agenda items are to be introduced after 10:30 p.m. At this time, because no one wishes to pull the item from the consent agenda, do I have a motion to approve the conditional use?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Fishman. Thank you. Ms. Beal?
Mr. Grimes?
Yes.
Mr. Way?
Yes.
Mr. Fishman? Yes. Mr. Supalack?
Yes.
Ms. Call?
Yes.
Mr. Snare?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. Moving on to our new case. Welcome back, Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel Health System Northwest Campus at 3865 Bright Road, 22-001Z PDP rezoning preliminary development plan. This application is a request for rezoning of approximately 35 acres from restricted suburban residential district to planned unit development district. The development consists of a 230,000 square foot, 30-bed inpatient hospital, ambulatory care facility, and medical office building. The site is located southeast of the intersection of Bright Road with Emerald Parkway, north of I-270 and west of Sawmill Road. For those in attendance, I just wanted to, maybe it's your first or not often frequent time with us, wanted to go through how we'll proceed through the agenda. We will first have our case presentation by staff. Ms. Martin will conduct that case presentation. Then we will turn it over to the applicant for a presentation. At that point in time, we will open it up for public comment for those who are both here in attendance and participating online. We will hear comments. We will close the discussion from the applicant, from staff. We will turn time over to the commission to ask questions. After all of the questions have been fielded by staff and by the applicant, we will close out that discussion. We will turn to deliberation, and we will discuss the item as a commission and move forward with whatever decisions are to be made this evening. Thank you. Ms. Martin?
Yes, good evening.
Thank you. Mr. Supalack, my vice chair, co-chair, is reminding me we have yet to swear in anyone for administrative cases. Anyone intending to address the commission, will you please stand, raise your right hand, and answer in the affirmative? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony to the commission this evening?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Martin.
Good evening, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Before you this evening is a request for a recommendation to City Council for a rezoning. This site is approximately 35.5 acres in size and is located northwest of the intersection of Sawmill Road and I-270. The site has frontage on I-270, Sawmill Road, Bright Road, and Emerald Parkway, and is located within the Bright Road Special Area Plan. There are a number of established single-family neighborhoods in the area, as well as a recently developed school. The Bridge Street District is located to the south of I-270. So as mentioned, this is a request for a recommendation of approval to City Council this evening, and that would be for a rezoning. The Commission previously reviewed concept plans for this development, and this is the next iteration of that plan. Subsequent to the preliminary development plan approval by City Council, a final development plan would come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission. At that stage, the plan would be reviewed for compliance with all of the standards set forth in the rezoning. I also want to emphasize that as part of this development process, the neighborhood has been engaged at every step. The East Dublin Civic Association has met with the Mount Carmel team several times between August of 2021 and most recently on February 23rd of 2022. You'll notice in your packet that the Civic Association did provide comments for the meeting this evening, and those comments have been addressed in staff's conditions. So with that, anytime a rezoning is under consideration, it's important to look at the community plan. The community plan is a guiding document adopted by City Council that provides recommendations for future land use and development patterns. The site is primarily designated premium office and institutional, which is a recommended land use density of up to 16,500 square feet of development per acre. Additionally, there are other supporting land uses in the area, including mixed residential medium density and standard office and institutional. The applicant with this rezoning is requesting a density not to exceed 314,000 square feet. You'll notice this is well within the community plan allowance and is consistent with the surrounding development character. The site is also located within the Bright Road Special Area Plan, which looks at sites and contemplates both design and mobility recommendations. As the Commission had previously identified, the community plan notes this site is a key gateway and an opportunity for signature architecture within the city, with large-scale office as well as institutional uses addressing I-270. Also, there's an opportunity for two-story offices that support these primary uses, as well as strong recommendations for robust landscaping, both along the Sawmill Road corridor as well as the Emerald Parkway corridor. The mobility recommendations emphasize the importance of connectivity and explore items that the city is currently studying in conjunction with this development. So in detail this evening, the proposal before you, like I mentioned, is the next iteration based on the feedback you had previously provided. From the beginning, there's been support for the hospital and medical use on this site, both from the Commission as well as the community. At the first review, the Commission strongly encouraged an organizing campus framework, which was directly responded to with the December submittal, where a health and wellness campus was established. Today, you'll see the next iteration of architecture and landscape details, which will be approved in a final form with the final development plan. So a summary of the site plan, this development is proposed to be developed in 2 phases. Phase 1 is shown on your screen and is a total development square footage of 230,000 square feet. This includes the hospital wing located along I-270, as well as the medical office building wing located to the north. The hospital wing is a total of 4 stories in height, accommodates 30 inpatient beds day 1, and also provides an unfinished 4th floor to be finished as part of phase 2. The medical office building is 2 stories in height and connected to the hospital by the main entry as well as the chapel feature. Phase 1 parking provides 2 parking lots, as 2 primary parking lots as well as 2 secondary parking lots west of the building. These parking lots are intended to serve patients, visitors, as well as specialty uses, including oncology and ambulatory care. The parking lot to the east of the building is intended to serve as staff parking, accessing the staff entry located along the east facade. A total of 780 parking spaces are proposed day 1. In the phase 2 future full site build out, which is identified in the development text, there's a total new square footage of development of 84,520 square feet, with the total sum of parking rising to 998 spaces. You can see the primary addition of building square footage as well as parking spaces occur with a new detached medical office building, which may be directly associated or in support of Mount Carmel facilities. The primary building in Phase 2 finishes the 4th floor, accommodates additional hospital space, as well as 45 phased parking spaces, and the detached medical office building as depicted on the screen. The second phase of development, you'll notice here, also provides vehicular connection to Bright Road, as well as additional pedestrian connectivity along Sawmill Road. The development text establishes regulatory standards, which include permitted uses as well as numeric standards for development. The permitted uses in the development text are intended to be medically oriented, as well as those that are accessory or critical to the support of the primary permitted uses, and then one conditional use. So you'll see here hospitals, clinics, health clubs, fitness centers, skilled nursing and hospice, as well as research, synthesis, analysis, and testing laboratories, the opportunity for general office and medical office, and then parks and open space, which are a primary use of this parcel. The only conditional use provided for the Commission's further consideration, should this be necessary at any point in time, is contemplating consideration of a drive-through pharmacy. There's no plan for this today, but simply preserving that opportunity to ask the question in the future. You'll notice the prohibited uses include all other drive-through facilities associated with restaurants or commercial users. So numeric development standards are also provided in the development text. The maximum building coverage is proposed to be 25%, and the maximum lot coverage is 75%. Consistent with the conceptual architectural character, the building is 4 stories in height and includes an additional mechanical screen penthouse with a maximum building height not to exceed 65 feet. Consistent setbacks are proposed along all public rights-of-way with a specific call out for buildings and pavement. The applicant will provide additional detail on architecture. However, the development text, which is regulatory, does provide minimum requirements that will be confirmed at the final development plan when the Commission is asked to approve architectural elevations and building materials. So this building is required to have 4-sided architecture, meaning that all 4 sides will be of a similar character and quality. It's also required to be a contemporary design clad in traditional building materials in the approximate percentages proposed on the screen. Also on the screen is the primary elevation view. This shows the view from I-270 as well as Emerald Parkway. You can see the hospital wing on the right-hand side, the chapel centrally located, and the medical office building on the left-hand side. As previously depicted, landscape continues to be the primary organizing form of this development. A total of 6.9 acres of open space is proposed to be provided on 35.5 acres, which is a substantial amount. The organizing greenways include the Wellness Green, the Northern Green, as well as Sawmill and I-270 buffers. From Emerald Parkway, the Wellness Green includes a landscaped entry boulevard with ponds, with basins, landscaping, as well as unique lighting and site furnishings. The Staff Wellness Plaza is located to the east of the building, visible from Sawmill Road, and the Oncology Garden for medical office building patients is located north of the building. Significant tree preservation and buffering are provided along the Bright Road portion of the site adjacent to existing residents. Staff is conditioning that the applicant continue to work with us in order to realign the Bright Road entry drive and ensure tree preservation to the maximum extent possible, Additionally, staff is conditioning that mounding and evergreen trees be continued to be explored at the final development plan. So here you can see a proposed planting plan. This will be further refined. As you can see, the applicant has heavily landscaped the perimeter of the site as well as all of these greenways in order to focus an enhanced landscape character. The development text provides minimum standards for both open space and parking lot landscaping. Parking is also established at a ratio in the development text. The applicant, based on their operations, has indicated that an increased amount of parking is necessary. Staff is requesting that this be further confirmed at the final development plan based on the operations of the facility for the Planning and Zoning Commission's consideration. Total in phase 1, 780 parking spaces are proposed, where the code would require 546. And in phase 2, 998 parking spaces are proposed, where the code would require 791. Additionally, the development text preserves the opportunity for signs to be designed with the final development plan, but sets a parameter for the number of signs and general location of these signs. The development text proposes to permit 4 building identification signs at a size of 350 square feet in size, mounted to the building. Additionally, 3 site entry ground signs are proposed to be permitted at a size of 50 square feet in size, not to exceed 15 feet in height, and then the opportunity to have 6 building entrance signs on the various facades to accommodate visitor identification of the building entries. These are either wall or ground signs. As you may recall, with a preliminary development plan, a traffic impact study is required to be performed. The applicant has submitted that as part of this application, and staff, in conjunction with the Ohio Department of Transportation and the City of Columbus, have reviewed this together, given the proximity to the Sawmill Road right-of-way located within the City of Columbus and the limited access right-of-way given I-270's location. So a traffic control improvement is anticipated at the main entrance. This is currently proposed as a traffic signal, although could be further studied and be eligible for a roundabout in the future, should that be recommended as part of the finalized study of the Emerald Parkway corridor. Additionally, the city is presently studying the entire length of Bright Road between the roundabout all the way to Sawmill and is looking at corridor improvements. Those corridor improvements are anticipated to occur in partnership and in conjunction with this development, although this development will trigger a left turn lane into the development. There is an existing access point along Sawmill Road that will continue to be shared with Perry Township. The anticipation is that this will continue to be a restricted access point. And then finally, there is a service and emergency drive connecting Emerald Parkway to Sawmill Road. So with that, the code sets forth review criteria, and staff makes a recommendation to the commission. Based on the 16 review criteria for a preliminary development plan, staff is recommending approval with 11 conditions. The first 3 conditions, primarily in regards to further coordination and entering into a development and infrastructure agreement with the city to document the final phasing of the project as well as the results of the traffic impact study. Conditions 4 and 5 are in regards to stormwater and continued coordination with the City of Dublin, the City of Columbus, and ODOT. Conditions 6 through 11 are related to the site plan, and that the applicant continue to work with us to refine items identified by staff as part of this review. With that, the applicant team does have a presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions at the end of their presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. We'd like to invite the applicant up for a presentation.
Very excited I got the mic to work on the first try. I think that's an update for me. So this is our third try, so I'm 1 out of 3. That makes me a baseball Hall of Famer, right? I need to say my name and all the other stuff too, so got it. Jason Coma, 7587 Tullymore Drive, Dublin, Ohio. No more baseball jokes, I promise. So thank you for the opportunity to address the commission tonight, and I appreciate staff's overview of the presentation. I want to go back to one of the things they said at the beginning that I'd like to highlight and emphasize, and that is the engagement with the community. Madam Chair, you had mentioned, I think, at our last appearance, that the importance of that. And if I can paraphrase the quote, it was, their voice is your voice. And we've taken that to heart, whether it was the East Dublin Civic Association or others. One of the conditions for approval tonight actually came out of a meeting with the Civic Association the other day, and that is regarding the entrance road connected to Bright Road and asking to move it a little bit further to the west. It was something that in the meeting with the Civic Association, we immediately said, hey, thank you for bringing that up. And absolutely, we can do that. And that's just part of what we want to do when we approach this project as a good neighbor. A couple updates on a few things related that I've told you before. We have advanced a few other things within the City of Dublin to be that good neighbor, working with the city schools. We'll be at their job fair on April 12th. HR made me say that. Also, the expectation is that Dublin City School students will be among our first cohort of any students 16 and up to be employed in our hospitals beginning in June. And that all comes from our partnership throughout this project and to be a good neighbor in the community. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about where we've been since the last time we've met. And from a healthcare perspective, certainly a lot happened in the winter. We had the largest surge we've ever seen in December of cases of COVID-19 and throughout January and into February. The most COVID-19 cases we had at any time in our hospitals. In fact, we had more than 200 members of the Ohio National Guard helping support our frontline staff and frontline healthcare workers. You know, as we sit here tonight, thankfully cases are down in the community. They're down in our hospitals as well. But it is 720 days since Mount Carmel stood up our COVID-19 Incident Command team. Almost 2 years. I've been honored to lead a section of that team in addition to my day job, which is this stuff, and other stuff, in fairness. But I want to take a moment to recognize the work of our frontline healthcare workers during those almost 2 years and put it in perspective of the project that we're discussing tonight. You know, the thing that I've often said to the public and to my non-clinical colleagues is when you go to the hospital, it's generally not your best day. It's generally just not a good day. And our job is to have our clinicians provide the highest quality care they can. And everybody else needs to do everything we can to make that day better. And that's what comes to this campus. You know, we've heard the commission talk about the health and wellness aspect, and we've really tried to embody that in what we've seen and what we've updated. From the green ribbon that runs through it to also acknowledging that this is, I believe, one of the very few, certainly I think in Central Ohio, hospital that has been planned and designed entirely within the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. So as the commission has helped direct us, push us for that health and wellness in the serene campus, you know, our learnings from the pandemic show that we need that. So in a way, thank you for helping us move there. And I hope what you will see tonight is an advancement of that concept, and we're looking forward to the discussion. my colleagues will walk us through a little bit more details of the presentation, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cromwell.
Mark Boltman, HGA Architects, 333 East Erie Street, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's nice to see you all again. It's hard to imagine that it's been 3 months already, and as Jason described, much has happened and much has progressed on the design. Just going to take I wanted to say thank you for your feedback in our previous 2 visits here, and of course, thank you to the city staff for all of the feedback that you've given us. We've taken that feedback very seriously, and I think it's made the design better. So my hope is that in reviewing the design, as my colleague Tim goes through that here in a moment, that you will see your input reflected in that. And you will see how the design responds to the unique character that is the city of Dublin. So Ms. Martin did such a great job with the context that I'm going to breeze through a couple of these slides here, just reorienting you again to the big idea of the Green Ribbon, the Health and Wellness Campus, the building and its siting, and as was described, its four-sided nature, that it's public on all sides. You will see how we've addressed that in the architecture here momentarily. And of course, reminding ourselves of the views, as I just said, you've got visibility from 270, visibility from Sawmill. Emerald Parkway, of course, is the primary entrance for patients and visitors, and then the future access point off of Bright Road. And then also, this is the phase 1 site plan, as you saw a moment ago. And then the phase 2 full build out. Not much has changed since last we saw, and of course, all of the detail that's provided in the report elaborates on that concept plan. And then just wanted to include this one because it's a reminder of where we were back at the end of November when last we met. We were just, we had a well-advanced site concept, but the building at that time was still massing, and this image was illustrating how that building would sit within the landscape concept that we were talking about. So today we're going to come back and show you how that massing is developed and how that's turned into architecture. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Tim Scanley, who is our senior designer with HGA. Thank you.
Good evening. As Mark said, Tim Scanley, design architect with HGA. Address is 333 East Erie Street, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. If we could go to the first concept slide. At the concept plan stage, as Mark described a second ago, the architecture was kind of this very nondescript white box stage. It was void of material and character. And at that very early stage, really before kind of design even started, we were drawn to this idea of using a very natural material palette that would reinforce this idea of a health and wellness centric campus. We wanted to choose materials that would evoke a sense of warmth, would have intrinsic natural texture and beauty, as well as create a human-scaled building to reinforce the healing mission of the Mount Carmel Hospital. One of our next steps was to also look at the Mount Carmel brand and to look to see if there was an identifying singular design language that we could begin to kind of pull over to the campus at Dublin. And as we kind of walked through a few of their campuses, what we discovered was that each individual campus was really informed really by the individual story of their context. And so as an organization, I think the idea that is that the Mount Carmel brand is rooted in the idea of actually fitting into the local community that it serves, each place in partnership. I do want to touch on the initial conceptual material palette. We're starting to explore an overall palette in which the building is seen as a quiet and simplified backdrop of light and dark neutral tones. On the left, we have a dark iron spot brick contrasted by the lighter white panel on the far right. In the center are accent materials of wood and textured limestone, which become these very vibrant splashes of color and interest that highlight important aspects of the building. The palette also leans towards having hospitality qualities, therapeutic in nature, calming, clean, and sophisticated. If the building is viewed as the backdrop, then I think the lead character actually becomes the landscape itself, where the landscape and its ever-changing seasonal color and interests really becomes the focus of the campus. Three common design goals that our team continued to kind of reinforce was number one, we wanted to create a patient experience that was warm and welcoming. We wanted to express this place as a place of healing, both physically and certainly spiritually. And we also wanted to emphasize that this is a place of wellness as well as a place of connection to nature. And we really wanted the architecture to be have a sense of scale and intimacy. So as we move into the exterior design, the next plan is really the different views and vantage points that we're going to be looking at in the next few slides. The first image is call it the bird's eye axon from Emerald Parkway. And I think what it does is it gives you a really nice description of the overall character and the building form, and speaks to the iconic landmark that the hospital will become at this site. In formal terms, the building massing is expressed in two parts. One, the base, which is wrapped in that dark iron spot brick. It unifies the expanse of the building with common materials and as well as similar window proportions. The deep, rich tonal qualities of the brick combined with the adjacent wood panels begin to create that grounding effect and to define that human experience as warm and welcoming. The top, which is the bed tower, a contrasting white metal panel and a glass element, has a picture frame, which becomes a signature element that can be seen from a far distance away. Visual markers clad in textured limestone also add contrast and direct attention to important building features such as entry portals and the chapel. Moving down to the ground level, this is a view coming off of Emerald Parkway as you kind of move further into the campus and really looking down the green ribbon as Mark described. One thing to point out is that really the central focus of the design really becomes the chapel. It's a dynamic form with steeple-like qualities that bring inspiration and hope to patients as they enter the building. Its placement at the termination of the green ribbon reinforces the healing mission of Mount Carmel, while also becoming a visual landmark to help visitors with campus and interior building wayfinding. To some people can be somewhat apprehensive and fearful coming to a hospital, right? They can be somewhat intimidating, stress-involved situations. And so one of the ways the architecture responds to this reality is by maximizing daylighting and increasing building transparency, all as a way to create an experience that's inviting and outward focused. Large expanses of glass along the base and the patient bed tower up above emphasize this daylight and allow moments for meaningful connections to nature and its healing qualities. Moving to the I-70 kind of view, this is a slightly higher vantage point than the interstate, but the siting of the hospital will certainly have good visibility to the interstate, mostly the upper levels. There is an existing tree line parallel to the interstate that will mostly screen the first two levels of the hospital. The large glass elements at the end of the bed tower open up the interior nurse work hubs to the exterior, allowing daylight and views to impact staff wellness. And from a branding perspective, building signage is certainly being developed and considered along the roof line that will conform to the PUD standards. As we move around to the Sawmill street view, the eastern edge of the site, as Mark described, is heavily landscaped with a multi-use trail that weaves through a series of landscape buffers and planting beds to create a naturalized screened edge for the parking and building beyond. The building itself is set back from the edge of Sawmill with a larger mass of the 4-story building facing I-270, and then begins to reduce in scale towards the north to a 2-story medical office building that faces the condo association. As we pull up to a view that no one will see except the birds, you'll begin to see a slightly better expression of the architecture. One thing to note is the green ribbon, the expression of the site really becomes apparent as the kind of east-west trajectory of that green ribbon connects Emerald Parkway to Sawmill Road. Architecturally, the building is much more horizontal along this elevation. It's mostly a 2-story expression, bookended by masonry forms on either end with a transparent glass connector at the knuckle, that really begins to describe the internal movement for staff moving between the hospital and the medical office building. Along the base of the building, staff breakout areas will certainly take advantage of these wellness gardens with outdoor seating and reflective landscape. They'll provide areas to recharge throughout their day and actively engage in the campus network of trails. Moving to the Bright Roadside, it's definitely a slightly different experience than the Emerald Parkway. The Bright Road is notable in its park-like approach to the hospital. It's certainly quiet, it's serene. It begins to weave through the kind of wooded portion of the site with views to that smaller scaled medical office building beyond. The building facade along that Bright Road elevation is meant to be a quiet facade, sympathetic of the adjacent residential buildings to the north. It's also a nonverbal cue to basically direct patients to the Emerald Parkway side and the main entrance to that medical office building. At the ground level, I did want to point out the meditation garden. This begins to wrap this end of the building. It's used primarily for the oncology program, which patients are receiving chemotherapy infusions. And it's a great example of how we've incorporated your feedback in allowing the landscape to engage the architecture in a more meaningful way. In closing, this is the last view here. We're back on the Emerald Parkway side. It begins to show the arrival experience for the medical office building. It's a very interesting view because we get a little bit closer to the building itself, and it begins to describe the dynamic layering of the building massing, the prominence of the chapel that is pulled away from the hospital itself, sits in front within the green ribbon, as well as the integration of the penthouse element above, which caps the bed tower. These are all ways to create a visual, interesting, and dynamic effect. So with that, thank you for allowing us time to explain our design story, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to do questions for both staff and the applicant. I feel that some of these are going to be overlapping. So Nikki, if we ask you something that is best fielded by the applicant, if you could direct us there. So turning time over to the commission. Mr. Wade, do you want to go first? Any questions for staff or the applicant?
Yeah. So again, I've got a lot of questions, but maybe we'll just parse through them as we go, and I'm not going to dominate the whole discussion. But one of the things that jumped out on me in the plan was this: you've got this beautiful central green, right, at the front entrance that is going to be your signature space, but there's a road that cuts through it, and I don't know what the purpose of that road is. In your diagrams that show fire truck flow, it's not a fire lane. So I'm just curious what the purpose of that connecting road is across the central green.
Thank you. It's to connect those two parking lots. It's basically a relief point that if you needed to get from one side to the other, you don't have to go all the way back out to the ring road to get to the other side.
So is that a must-have element that, for the function, or is it something that would be a consideration of, again, you've got this beautiful open space set up, gateway coming in, you've got this space at the main entrances, both of them, and it just seems like that's a disruptor to this beautiful kind of concept that you have coming in. It jumped right out at me when I saw it, and just wanted to get a feedback on that.
Can you clarify on this? I believe, Nikki, if you could mouse over where and just have Mr. Way confirm.
I'm sorry, so you are speaking about the connection between the two primary parking lots?
Yeah, right at where the arrowhead is, red arrowhead is, that.
Yeah, my hand is there, but it's small and white, so.
I think functionally it's pretty important to
Sorry.
us. I'm sorry.
Doing my best.
I think functionally it's pretty important to us that we have that opportunity to connect those two. I understand why that jumps out to you. It also in some ways provides a separation between the larger green and the garden that is fronting on the building. And we've purposely diminished the scale of that and its significance so that it's not a generally, a thoroughfare. It really is a relief valve between those two parking lots if somebody ended up in the wrong spot. And then it does serve as a pedestrian connection across that green space because we do have the water features that are in there.
So again, functionality, I wanted to understand, my first thought was, well, it's a fire lane connection, you have to have it, but I don't think that's the case. But if it's part of that green space, designing it in a way that it's part of a park and not a connector between two parking lots.
I think that's very well said, and that'll be an important detail that we bring back at the final development plan. The design of that connection will have a lot to do with the success of that green space. So I appreciate that.
Mr. Way, I think your first assessment was also accurate as well. Having that fire lane connection is an additional level of functionality. So
But it doesn't show up in your fire lane diagram. So that was another confusion.
okay.
The fire lane diagram has them as separate fire access points, north parking lot, south parking lot. So I was reading that it's not a fire lane connection. So are you clarifying that it is a fire lane connection?
That
Chris Fleming, 1650 Watermark Drive. I'm the civil engineer on the project. It is requested by the fire department to be able to circulate through that area to get as close to the building as they can. So it's a bit of a compromise between, we don't want it to be a main drive, but they also want to be able to get through there. So the trick is how to make it designed cleanly and yet still feel like a nice space between the two. But the fire department did request that they be able to get between those two spaces.
Thanks for that clarification. Mr. Fleming, you can stay up. So can you, there's a lot of stormwater retention on the site. And some of the renderings show it as water. And I guess although the labels say it's just retention, you're not keeping water in those basins anywhere, right?
The 3 basins in the front that are colored blue will be water.
They'll have water in them all
It
the
will
time.
be wet ponds, as we would describe them.
Wet ponds, yeah.
Yes, and then the middle basin in the courtyard in the back is proposed to be dry, and then the other basin in the back, I think we've still kind of discussed whether that's wet or dry in the back.
The one out by Sawmill, is that wet also? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know if we've come to that complete conclusion yet. It's colored blue, but we have been talking it's wet, dry, or it's bioretention or some sort. It will match whatever requirements that we're required to do for stormwater with that one. We just haven't gotten there yet. But we need all of that space. It's actually we don't have a good outlet. So we need to over detain quite a bit on site.
Okay.
Mr. Henderson, if you could offer clarity on the detention retention basins.
Right. Good evening. Yes, so Chris is correct. So the 3 basins along Emerald Parkway are proposed to be retention basins, so wet basins. The plans do currently show that basin along Sawmill Road is also a wet basin. But again, that could potentially change, but that is how it's being proposed currently.
And then, Mr. Hendershot, just for the record, can you talk about quality, quantity as far as water mitigation and what will be required from a city perspective?
Right, so this project, like any other project within the city of Dublin, is required to meet both water quality and quantity requirements. So they have submitted calculations and they are showing that they're meeting both water quality and quantity requirements. So this is a preliminary development plan stage, so we will have further refinement as this project progresses, but at this stage, they are demonstrating compliance.
Thank you, Mr. Hendershot.
You're welcome.
Back to you, Mr. Ray.
Okay, I have one more question, at least for now, and maybe some others will follow up. So the Oncology Garden is a very interesting component. If you consider the east-west, flow, and then you've got this north-south, and so I think I understand the Oncology Garden provides a purpose to the green space on that side of the campus. So the north entry and that whole space, I wonder if you could, is it just to accommodate a road and maybe a pathway, or could that whole environment be considered to be park-like, could have amenities in it, could have sculpture in it? Is there a purpose for that space other than access?
Good evening, Brian Kinzelman, Senior Landscape Architect at MKSK. What's my address? 462 South Ludlow. Sometimes I forget that. Good questions, Mr. Way. Yeah, as you know, that's a substantial woodlot now. We're going to very strategically weave that driveway through there. I think it's a great community asset for interstitial open space, routing a trail system through there, maybe hard surface, maybe soft, maybe both, who knows. But we do have an opportunity for respite places in there. My colleagues showed one of the renderings of the building as you approach from Bright Road. I think at Bright Road, you're not going to see much of that building because that is a substantial woodlot, and we want to be very judicious with how we take the roadway through there. The Oncology Garden is a significant piece of the indoor-outdoor function of the facility. We've got other gardens that are intimate and closer to the building, but that's also the quiet side of the site, as my colleague had mentioned. And I've always envisioned this Bright Road Park just leading right up into that Oncology Garden and then branching off into those other two fingers of open space. So I think it becomes park space.
And you hit the nail on the head when you said it's an existing wooded space. The rest of the site is not wooded per se. And here's a wooded environment that you can create something unique and different. And so that's why, is it the woodland garden, or, it needs to have a purpose. And I think, I guess I'd like to see that explored some more. I'm going to take a break at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Way. Why don't we jump down to the other end, Mr. Schneer?
Thank you. Nikki, could you put the parking slide back up again, please?
Would you prefer phase 1 or phase 2?
This one.
So, perfect.
A couple questions, one specific, one more generic. Is there the map? So phase 1 says 780, and then it foots down to 780. And then the development text says phase 2, 985, but then proposed says 998. Is that a bust, or is that?
No, that's true. So based on the requirements of the development text, they are providing more than they would be required by about 13 spaces, I think. But the second line is the code requirement. So with phase 1, the code requires 546, and with phase 2, the code requires 791.
Ms. Martin, I believe he's asking the difference. If you look at the top right total box of 985 in phase 2, and the very bottom of the slide where it says 998, how does the 998 factor into this?
This table is correct. The applicant has chosen to provide more parking than their development text would require.
Okay, so development text P1 is phase 1.
Yes.
So the total right-hand box is 780.
Yes.
and then you drop down to the second line from the bottom, second row from the bottom, says Phase 1 proposed 780. So for
Yes.
Phase 1, they're proposing 780, correct?
They are required 780 and they are providing 780.
Mr. Schneer, I believe you and I are stuck on the same thing. The top one is the development text. The bottom one, I believe, is the drawing.
Okay,
Because they're
but the development text,
Is what would govern the PUD.
yeah,
Yeah, so this is, and potentially the applicant can speak to parking, but the first line, if we ignore what the code would require,
right.
the applicant provides a ratio of parking, and based on all of the land uses, as well as the number of staff, with Phase 2, since they have 10 more staff members, and you multiply that by 1.3,
Got it.
the resulting requirement is 985. What the applicant is showing on their plans for Phase 2 is that they would like to provide more than the requirement, and they're going to provide, with Phase 2, 998 spaces.
So, okay, thank you. I understand that now. So that goes to my question, why, and I'll ask the applicant this as well, why there is such a significant deviation from the code. Why does the applicant feel they need that many more spaces than the code would require for this use? And I saw a condition there relative to parking. So would this all be, would we be approving this ratio, or is that subject to the condition for there's a condition about studying the parking? Before I drill down further on this.
So with the development text, should you make a recommendation of approval to council, you would be approving the ratio in the text. That being said, we are requesting that the text be revised to say that they are to provide us a parking plan substantiating this need at the final development plan. So they will have to provide evidence to that effect, but it would entitle them to provide the minimum amount of parking they are proposing today. So it would entitle them to at least 780 spaces in Phase 1 and at least 985 spaces in Phase 2.
Okay, thank you. Then for the record, could the applicant comment on why the ratio should be what it is relative to what our code requires?
Sure. We design a lot of hospitals, and just being honest, we often find that the real demand of the hospital is different than what the codes require in the places that we're working. A lot of times the municipal codes, hospitals are pretty unique things. The standards are often created around, I think, different expectations than the realities of how the hospital gets built. So we have benchmark numbers that we use from all of the work that we've done that get to ratios of number of cars per bed, number of spaces per square foot. We have different ways that we calculate that. So there's two factors that go into that. There's the peak demand, which is generally during the day, which includes staff and visitors. And then you also have to account, because it's a 24-hour facility, there's a shift change that happens. So you will have people arriving, plus you have the people that haven't left yet. So the only time that you'll see those lots full is generally at that shift change time. And there's a ratio that we provide versus the count. So I think actually if you looked at the demand during the day, during the peak shift, it's probably pretty close to what the code requires. But then when you factor that up to address the shift change, that's where you get the bigger number.
So it's a peak
Yes, sir.
issue.
It's a peak demand.
Peak demand issue, because we all acknowledge the necessity of parking. We would like to see as much green and as little
For sure.
black as possible. So trying to strike this appropriate balance.
Yes.
And I'm hopeful that the staff will look into that and is peak an hour? Is peak a half an hour? Is it 2? Is it coincident peak, non-coincident peak? So that was.
Yeah. We have we didn't do it for this one, but we have the ability to model the actual exact demand that you'll have based on staff that are anticipated in the building and the patient arrival times. And we used that to reinforce or confirm our benchmark numbers that we were using. So we'd be happy to share some of the methodology behind that. And I assure you, we are not motivated to provide any more parking than is absolutely necessary because there's cost attached to that. And
Yes.
putting your money in asphalt isn't anybody's priority.
We would like grass. Algorithms, parking algorithms. A question perhaps for you. I don't recall a discussion, that we had any discussion relative to the helicopter, the helistop. I assume it's, well, first question is it required for the functionality of the hospital, or is it something that is very useful for the hospital and therefore very useful for the community? And then the second question is relative to we may be back to a peak usage question, but relative to the usage and just being sensitive to the neighborhood.
Let's see, the first question is it an important function? Yes.
Is it required?
Is it required? Yeah, yes, for the functionality of the hospital. And it's primarily an outgoing patient. That's why it's a helistop, not a helipad. Okay. It's anticipated that it will be used infrequently, probably on the order of once or twice a month. So
it's to transport patients?
It is to transport patients out of the hospital to a higher acuity or to a quaternary care center or somebody that has required levels of care for that particular patient.
It's not for ER, trauma one sort of.
Correct.
Yeah,
you don't have life flight coming to the campus routinely dropping patients off. Yes.
Okay, that's responds to both of them, actually.
Yep. And just as a side note, we met with the FAA and the Ohio Department of Transportation within the last week, and both of them have confirmed that they don't have any issues with its location or the flight paths associated with it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
That's it.
And I would add just one clarifier, it's actually less frequency than that. So a couple times, not once or twice a month, even just a couple times a year for this type of hospital. So, and I say that as someone who may or may not live on a flight path at a different hospital. Just.
Thank you for the clarity. Mr. Fishman.
Yeah, I was concerned about L4 too, but it's next to the highway. So it's probably the best place it could be. Was there consideration to put it on a roof? I've seen that in hospitals. That gives us more green space.
Putting it on the roof comes with its own complexities. You have to get fuel up to the roof because you have to refuel the helicopters, and that has significant costs attached to that. And given the infrequency with which it's going to be used, as Jason described, it's pretty typical in a community hospital setting like this to put it on the ground. And its adjacency to the ED is really important. When you're transporting patients out, that proximity is pretty important.
Okay. And I just have one clarification. Maybe I'm dense. When the hospital is built.
Mr. Fishman, I believe they just wanted to clarify the helipad, the helistop, excuse me.
Hi. I'm Diane Doucette, 16171 Lewis Road, Sunbury, Ohio. I'm the nurse that came before you a few months ago. I just wanted to address your question, sir. When this helistop would be used, it could be a major motor vehicle accident. Someone could be severely injured. They would go into our ED, be stabilized. We'd call for life flight to come and transport them to the trauma center. As a nurse, we would not want to waste time going through the hospital, going up through the roof, to get them there when we could land right there close to the ED and transport them as quickly. So from a patient safety standpoint, that's why it's quick access to get them in and out. I just wanted to clarify a little bit more from a nursing perspective.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. As I said, if it's got to be somewhere, that's probably the best place in the front there, next to the highway, not back to
Part of the sensitivity was being as remote from the neighbors, of course, as we could be, so.
Yeah, just clarification, what was brought up about the parking, I don't quite understand. When the building is built, when the buildings are built, how many parking spaces will be there? The required or the extra parking spot?
Honestly, I think that the 13 that you were pointing to is the difference is really just a function of how the expansion of the parking lot gets laid out. So the number, the lower number is the calculated number. The additional 13 is really just when we expand the parking lot, we ended up with 13 additional spaces. That's really the only difference.
Yeah, right. But, and that'll be worked out with staff? While,
yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep.
No other questions?
I'm done, yeah.
All right. Mr. Grimes.
Thank you. I have a question also about the helipad. From a flight safety standpoint and lighting, emergency lighting, the high tension power lines that are on the other side, that's pretty much dictates where you have to put this for the safety coming and going. But flying in maybe over the freeway or over Sawmill, there's not a lot of room for a lot of lighting. But I don't know what's required. Can you speak to that at all?
Sure. The FAA has very well described requirements for lighting of the helipad itself. There's in-ground lights that go around the perimeter of it. So it's not the sort of thing that would be visually intrusive to anybody. It's really about as the pilots are coming in, that spot is lit, that they know where they're landing, and they see the perimeter of the helipad.
So you're saying nothing additional on the power lines or on the building itself are necessary during flight operations?
No, there's, the FAA circular also describes they call it the FATO, the Flight Approach Takeoff Plane. There's a specific angle at which helicopters take off of, and as long as the obstructions are below that angle, then you don't have to light them. And like I said, we reviewed that with the FAA, and we're good there.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Mr. Suplak.
This is actually more for staff, and it's probably more of a technicality than anything else, right? Obviously, this building is not really in danger of bumping into any building setbacks. But I still wonder, right, as the site potentially develops in other ways, not that anybody's going to tire of running a hospital really quickly and want to move on. But when other buildings potentially start to be desired in other areas of the site, are the building setbacks enough? And I guess I'm going to Emerald Parkway. I thought I saw 50 foot on that, and then 50 foot on Bright Road.
No, so it's actually there's a pavement and a building setback. And so the building setback along Emerald Parkway, which I'm going to pull up this table for you, is 100 feet. But the pavement setback is 50 feet. And so the Sawmill Road setback is 100 feet. And that's really to just provide that generous landscape buffer that's consistent with the Emerald Parkway corridor.
And maybe I was eyeballing the I-270 setback.
Yes. So the I-270 setback, that's consistent throughout the city of Dublin and is the 50 feet that the Ohio Department of Transportation requires. We do want buildings to be able to be sited adjacent to the highway versus having parking lots adjacent to the highway. So that's how you get there.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Wade, do you have any more questions?
I do.
Perfect. Let's go back to you.
So I want to build off what Mr. Schneer said about parking and not building parking to give up green space. I would comment on the site plan that there's very large parking lots and not a lot of landscaping in them. And so getting back to parking quantities, I think I would like to see a lot more greenery in the parking lot, which means you'd have to somehow offset parking. So that may come hand in hand. I mean, our desire to have more green space, especially in parking lots, may then cause the parking to go down. or they find it somewhere else. So that's a comment building on that. The second comment I have, and I don't know, this is maybe for staff too. So this building is 4 stories, and then there's the penthouse. And the penthouse on this is like another story. So how does that work with the 65-foot maximum?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And so the 65 feet and the 4 stories, the 65 feet would be measured to the top of the 4th story, so the occupiable story. The penthouse, while it has the presence of an additional story, is not accessible as usable space to the public, and primarily screens mechanicals, and therefore is not being counted as part of the total height of the building, even though it presents similarly.
So could you pull up one of the renderings? Because, hospitals are unique and they have huge mechanical requirements. And so their penthouses are much bigger than what you might typically find. And I think that if you look at the rendering, you've got a footprint that's almost the full size of the building, that's almost a full floor height. And so in essence, it creates a 5-story building, and it's taller than 65 feet. I'm just questioning, it meets the requirements is what you're saying, so it's okay. But in essence, it's not a 4-story building, it's a 5-story building.
Yeah, we had a lot of discussion about this with the applicant and looked at, how we've dealt with this at other hospital facilities. There are really 2 approaches to this to make the overall number significantly larger. For example, Ohio State is permitted to be 118 feet in height, but is significantly shorter, which that seems to be too permissive. So is there a way to ensure through stories and maximum height that we are getting something that is compatible with the community, but definitely appreciate, these penthouses probably are about 20 feet in height. So
Yeah, and I'm not actually criticizing it. I'm saying that we should just be honest in how we present it, because it is really, it creates a more massive building, bulk, height. We just need to characterize it that way. And then I had another question, and maybe this is for staff also, about signage. This site is very unique in that you've got Emerald Parkway, you've got Bright Road, you've got Sawmill Road. You've got 3 very, very separate arrival points. And I was looking at the sign numbers that we have, and I'm thinking of, man, you've got to identify it as a hospital, as Mount Carmel Hospital. You've got to direct people to the emergency. Emergency signs are huge to get. And I want to make sure that this proposed signage language is really supportive of this site and the use that's here. And so we don't have to go through these discussions in the future about signage.
Yeah. So I can't help you there because the final development plan, there will definitely be further discussions about signage because those are one of the items that are finalized at that stage. Really right now, we are trying to establish some parameters. On your screen right now are the 13 potential permanent signs. I do have another slide that summarizes all of the sign standards that are contemplated, and there is a whole lot of flexibility in order to design these further at the final development plan. So I do believe, at least from a city perspective, there will be adequate site wayfinding.
Great, thanks. And one other question, are crosses considered to be signs?
So there is a category about additional signs. These could be emergency signs, which is how we're considering those. Not the crosses, I'm sorry, but how we're accounting for emergency signs rather. And I would anticipate that potentially in the additional sign category would go the kind of, I don't know what you would call that, a graphic representation of the mission.
Yeah, right. So it is considered to be a sign?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Schneer.
Could you put the elevation and elevation slide back up? And I had a question. I thought I understood sort of the materials, and then I got confused and I forgot to ask before, when there was a description of the materials. So perhaps if you could walk through very briefly, particularly the penthouse, and then above, I guess that's the office building. So there's the sort of the iron brick or whatever, and then what's on the penthouse area?
Sure. So for the
Maybe if you, I'm sorry, if you started at the base,
sure.
with the,
So
right
for
there,
for
and
the
work your way up.
hospital, along the base, kind of that darker material is that dark iron spot brick.
Okay.
It's a similar brick tone to the brick paving intersections along Bridge Park.
Okay.
So it is a kind of a richer tonal quality, plums, kind of charcoal colors. It's a very kind of a unique and somewhat modern brick, if you will. Next to that, you see kind of somewhat kind of an oranger tone. That would be that natural wood veneer panel. It is an exterior product. Then the stone would be certainly the kind of buff tone, the tone from the stair tower, the chapel, and then across the medical office building at the end. The white panel, we're still trying to understand commodity prices and availability, but we're thinking either a white metal panel with a multicolored kind of a subtle tonal shift. So we get kind of that warm kind of white tonal quality. And it also could potentially be a cement panel as well. What you see on the penthouse is really a profiled panel that would coordinate really with the white metal panel. So that could be like a louvered system that would require for either air coming in or exhaust coming out.
Metal?
Yes, it would be.
Okay. And then, is that the office building to the left or the?
And that would be a screen wall. It's actually not a penthouse. So it is open to the air up above. And that would be also a metal louver. You do have fresh air requirements. So most likely that will also be an open louver system that allows air to travel through one way or the other.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
I have just a couple of questions, and maybe the landscape architect is probably good to field mine. On the Emerald Parkway section, where those retention basins, the wet basins, do you anticipate fountains, moving water, anything like that in those?
I don't at this juncture, but I do look at that entire frontage as one big landscape composition, not three ponds with some plants around it. So it'll be sculpted, it'll be earth forms, and pretty robust plantings as well. So I don't think we have to move water. If we do, I think we might just do low bubblers to keep water circulating, not trying to make some Disney-esque expression out of it.
Got it. And then was there any contemplation to water in that Oncology Garden area?
Irrigate it?
Water feature of any type, essentially?
Certainly. When we get down to that level of those more intimate spaces, that's when we're going to take a real fine look at just the kind of human qualities of it. Sure, could very well have some moving water in there.
Yeah, I'm thinking for that peaceful feeling, the moving water where you don't have very many, it's not the densely treed area, so you're not going to have that natural tone of things coming through the leaves.
And it's that quiet side of the complex as well.
Exactly. Those are my only questions. Looking back, Mr. Way.
I forgot my first question.
Oh, there you go.
Which kind of is, and this is a question for the applicant about public art. Are you working with the Dublin Arts Council at all and integrating any kind of public art into the project, into the site?
We will be. That's something that we've wanted to incorporate is a local artist and working with the council.
Thank you. That would be fabulous. Look forward to seeing that. And one other comment about, we're at that stage where the project's just evolving and the landscape, this great kind of overall concept, and you're starting to flush it out. I'm really looking forward to the landscape renderings that are really going to show what the landscape looks like. I think it's been the architectural renderings, it's a little downplayed. It's hard to really appreciate it. So I think at the next level, I'm really looking forward to that.
Any other questions from the commission at this time before I turn it over for public comment? Ms. Roush, have we received any online public comment?
Yes, we did receive one this evening, and there were two prior ones that were included in your packet already. So the one we received today is from Jerry Kosicki at 4313 Wyandotte Woods Boulevard in Dublin, Ohio. The project fits the community plan well, will provide needed services to the community, and we anticipate the collaborative efforts you have engaged in with the East Dublin Civic Association. The contemporary buildings are attractive. I understand the need for parking, but do you have figures for how many of these spaces will be used regularly by staff versus for visitors or patients? Will some lots be used exclusively by staff, or will some close to the building be reserved for patients and visitors? Does all the parking have to be in large parking lots? Could some of it be under the buildings or maybe in structured parking? This is partly a matter of aesthetics, but also to make parking more convenient for users. How many minutes will it take to walk from the farthest reaches of the parking area to the building? Will any of the parking have chargers for electric vehicles? And then regarding landscaping, which is generally attractive, what proportion of the site is taken up with these water retention ponds? Did you consider putting any of these ponds underground to make more usable open space?
Thank you, Ms. Roush. Well, a few of those will be handled in final development plan as we get more to, like we like to say, we're at Duplo blocks right now. We get down to the Legos in the next phase. I did want to point out the staff parking lot that's indicated on our drawings right now is the one that's located closer to Sawmill. All right, thank you for reading that in, Ms. Roush. Does anyone here from the public wish to address the commission? Please come forward, one at a time. The microphone is currently on. We'll watch for the green light around the microphone. Please state your name and address for the record.
Carla Clifton, 3899 Inverness Circle, Dublin, Ohio, 43016. So I have been to all three of these zoning committees. And what I didn't hear approached was about what the traffic study revealed and what you're going to do with Bright Road. So that is a concern with me because I live in the condominiums. Another concern I have you thought about where these large construction trucks with these equipment and beams, are they going to be coming down Bright Road trying to get around the roundabout to enter on Emerald Parkway? Or are you going to take them through downtown Dublin and bring them up Emerald Parkway? Have you considered what all these massive trucks with all this equipment, how are you going to get it in to start building? And then the last thing I wondered is on the application itself, it says the address for the hospital is Bright Road. And Bright Road, opening that part is in phase 2. Shouldn't their address be Emerald Parkway so when people use the GPS, they're being directed to get in Emerald Parkway? Those are my 3 thoughts that I would like considered.
Wonderful. I'm going to turn some time over to the applicant to field a few of those questions, and we will come back to public comment after the fielding of those questions.
Thank you.
Ms. Call, could I answer the last question first?
Certainly.
Yeah, in regards to addressing today, that 35.5 acre parcel only has one property address, which is the remnant of a house that was demolished, sited along Bright Road. So today that is the property address. It's anticipated that engineering will work with the user to identify a new property address, which will be probably a round number and addressed off Emerald Parkway.
It almost put me at 1 for 4, but I got it at the last second. Sorry. So to the other, thank you, Nikki. Sorry, Ms. Martin, for that answer. To the other question on construction traffic, I'd go back to our general comments on being a good neighbor. I think we would work out the best, most unobtrusive way to do that. I don't know if we have that answer right now. I think one of the things I mentioned at the last meeting with the Civic Association, I'm happy to do the same tonight, publicly, not public. I got a stack of cards. I got a cell phone. If there is loud trucks when this happens, if there is dirt, if there is dust, I don't care what time of day it is, call me and I will make things right and we will fix it right away. It's part of my role within these projects, and it's part of being a good neighbor, and it's important to me, quite frankly. This is where I live too, so thank you.
Thank you. Continuing on with, did you have an item to field?
I didn't know if you were interested in any information about Bright Road.
The traffic study specifically, yes.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Nikki. So this is showing the overall recommendations of this study. As you know, the traffic impact study was performed by the applicant to understand the mitigation that would be required to mitigate the site traffic. In addition to that, the city is also taking a look at the Bright Road corridor and the intersection of Sawmill and Bright, knowing that today those are not ideal conditions. So we are coordinating those two projects together with the applicant, and those details will be worked out with the agreement that goes to City Council.
Thank you. And then Nikki, I know this particular slide you spoke to early in your presentation, but could you very quickly go through the different icons that are on the drawing and pay specific attention to the Bright Road and the timing and what the current objective is on Bright Road?
Yeah, so let me provide a general overview. I'm not able to speak to timing this evening, but perhaps there's someone else from our team that could follow up. So along Emerald Parkway at the main entry where you see the star, the traffic impact study recommends a traffic control improvement at that location. So a type of traffic control, and the one that is identified in the plans before Planning and Zoning Commission this evening, is a traffic light. So that would be a full access point. The service drive, which is the small circle along Emerald Parkway, that is also proposed to be a full access point, but would not be signalized and would be limited to emergency and service vehicles only. The traffic study also identifies that Sawmill Road would continue to be a restricted access point in some capacity. And then at Bright Road, this particular development triggers a left-hand turn lane into the development. That would be coordinated in conjunction with the city study that, as Tina mentioned, is currently underway.
And that was the timing I was looking for, was the currently underway city accommodation. Thank you. Any others here for public comment? Seeing none, I'll look back to the commission one more time for questions before we close questions and discussion and move on to deliberation. Seeing none, Mr. Schneer, do you want to go first?
No, actually, it's been quite enlightening and welcoming to see the evolution of this project and the responsiveness of the applicant. My questions were answered for now with the proviso and caveat relative to parking that we'll get another shot at. But other than that, I am a support of the project and would like to see it develop.
Thank you, Mr. Schneer. Mr. Fishman.
Yeah, I totally agree. If I had anything against this development, it would be there's a lot of parking lots, and I kind of wonder when the next piece is developed, will it be a parking garage considered? I don't think I've ever seen a hospital without a parking garage. Is that a possibility? We hate to get rid of any more green space.
Sorry, Jason. When you look at the full build out at phase 2 and the growth in parking from 780 to the 985, all of that can be accommodated with surface parking. When you consider the total build out of the building, it would not trigger a need for a parking structure. That doesn't mean that it couldn't happen, but right now it's assumed that that's not part of the long-term development plan.
Any other questions or comments?
That's it. I think it's a welcome project. I'm very excited about it, and we're looking for a beautiful project, and I think it will be.
Mr. Suplak.
I'm going to start by echoing my fellow commissioners thus far. This is developing nicely. Obviously, there's some ongoing consternation, and I don't think it's lost on you either. That could the lots tighten up, right? However that comes to fruition, and to Mr. Way's commentary, right? Or even if they can't tighten up, can they be supplemented with a little more green space type of thing? That, we're all humans. We've all done this walk, right? So just, keep humanity in mind, and obviously you guys do in more ways, probably more ways than we do. So I'm generally supportive. I do think I very much applaud, I'm going to get into architecture more so than anything. I very much applaud your west side and or the sort of south side. The east side, I'm hungry for more. This is now going to start to become a little bit nuanced, right? So the east side, I know you don't see it quite the same way, but it is going to be seen from 270, and so it feels like it needs more love relative to some of the other facades. Is all it is, and you guys clearly have that touch. So I leave it to you, sort of continue to work through that from this point forward. I do think about this. There's a few touches that, again, from my design view, I might like to see. I really applaud the certain elements like the chapel and what you're trying to do, making it a sort of a special little gem in that pocket. I wonder, just even from this vantage point, if one of those walls might be able to cant instead of being vertical, cant and start to, just lean into exactly what you're doing, but even take it more. This staying on this facade, if we're going on the picture box, the white paneled picture box here, right? That is in large part right now, and I know it's early, but now's our chance to say it. It is in large part coplanar with the glazing. It'd be wonderful if it starts to separate a little bit, right? Starts to have some real depth, and I don't know if that also means consider does it skew slightly relative to that, or have a bend in it. Those types of moves like that start to take what you've already started and really start to love on this architecture quite a bit more. And I don't think it's that difficult of an exercise from where you are. It's really sketching over the renderings you've already made and just finding those really nice moments. I might also offer, relative to that commentary, there's a couple things while we just sit here. Your canopies are very flat and kind of undynamic, and they're blending into some of the sort of horizontality of the building. But do they sort of tongue up or something like that? There's opportunity there, and or in some of your some of your inspiration images, there was underbellies of bottom sides of things that were wood clad and compelling because of it up on 7. Yeah, there you go. That bottom image to the right. Do you really activate your canopies in compelling ways? And you're again the stage of this design is at a certain point, and now that type of level of detailing starts to become really impactful. And then finally, I guess I'm going to go to the mechanical screens on the lower building. In part, we see them, and that is a large sort of block solely because it doesn't seem to have much of a parapet sort of rising, but somehow that could all, right, there, from that view, it looks like it's the flat roof. Right, which would just might be a vestige of the model that was built, less so the actual sort of architecture that's being built. But my point is, those touches, those are the things that are going to start to really make this sing in a compelling way, even past what you've already started, and what you've already started is pretty wonderful. So forgive me for going very architectural, but again, now's the chance. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Supalack. Mr. Grimes.
Thank you. I think this is an amazing project. I'm looking forward to it. Again, I would say we'll have to wait to see what some of the traffic issues might be. I'm pleased that some of the discussion the city is talking about widening and improving Bright to make it flow better, but it's not that long of a road, and you get a shift change in there and you're going to load it up real quick. So if there's a way that you can design or discourage people from using that Bright Road as part of your project, I would strongly recommend it, because there isn't a lot of space there. So directing them out and around to Hard Road, through Emerald, whatever it takes, because that's going to be a pinch point. Even if they made it 5 lanes all the way through there, I don't see at certain times it's going to be a whole lot better, because you're going to be limited by getting out onto Sawmill. There's a lot of times when you can't even get out because they've already loaded it. So those are things that are of great concern, I know, to the people in this room, and something that should be thought through somehow to make it not be negative on your project long term. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Mr. Ray.
So I think you've heard a lot of my comments and a lot around landscape and kind of the details that are going to emerge, hopefully. The architecture, I just want to make a point about that, is the dark iron spot brick. I always think of that as like a really dark gray, and right now it's looking like purple, and it's looking like it's trying to match the Mount Carmel logo, and I don't think that's the intent. So I'm really interested to really understand what that material is and what color it actually is, and it doesn't reflect, it's not there just to reflect the logo of Mount Carmel, although maybe that's the intention. But yeah, I can start to see it in that picture, but it's in the renderings, it's looking very purple, which is kind of, it's making me uneasy. And the other thing, as we go through this next round, that I think is really important, is that all your renderings have no cars in them. And that really makes it look great. And we're all concerned about parking and the amount of parking, but we don't see any cars in the renderings. So I'm hoping when you come back to us with the next iteration of this, that we are honest about what we see. And in those views, you'll also see how landscape can be done in a way to actually help to soften and screen parking lots. And so I think it's really important that when we move into the final stages of this, that we reflect imagery that is what people are going to expect, what they're going to see on the day that it opens. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Way. Mr. Super, did you have one more?
One more. I don't know if this is plausible. We don't need an answer now, but I guess I'm going to it. I heard you loud and clear. The parking is an operational sort of component of the way. The parking and the peak is a function of the operation. And I guess I'm going to, would there be merit in staggered shift change across the hospital in a compelling way? I don't know if that's plausible. I defer to you all, but obviously there is real merit for you guys to figure that out long term and save yourself parking lots building in the future.
Mr. Way.
I think you're hearing some real angst about the parking. I mean, we as a commission, if you watch our meetings, parking is becoming a real issue because we're trying to create a world that isn't driven around parking, that's about people. And so I, as a commissioner, and I hope my other commissioners are expressing to you that we want to not have this site dominated by the car. And I know there's going to be a lot of cars. And I work on a lot of hospital sites, so I know exactly how they function. There's a balance there somewhere. I think there could be less parking. I think there could be more landscape, and I think it could be done in a way to really soften and really kind of help the parking be mitigated in the context of the site.
Thank you, Mr. Way. To tie us out this evening, I just wanted to go through a few things. And first of all, thank you. You've engaged. I think you're very attuned to the sensitivities that we have around this project, around this particular intersection set. You'll hear traffic, and you've heard traffic over and over again from us up here and from people in the audience and from people who participate remotely. With that being said, you have definitely listened and taken our concerns and others' concerns into consideration. You heard a new item brought up tonight that we've heard in previous meetings. I don't know if we've heard with you, but that's the EV, the charging stations. And so if there are opportunities to consider those additional sensitivities, whether they be the traffic study, and we heard from Ms. Martin and others from staff today, the mitigation steps that we're trying to work with. You heard some of the construction concerns, and your response to that was very much appreciated. We do know congestion, and Mr. Grimes pointing out, the construction of multiple lanes doesn't necessarily mitigate it. You heard from Mr. Supelak on the surge, and maybe there's a creative way to solve this. I work in supply chain, and so peak is, we don't plan vacations around Thanksgiving ever. My husband and I are in the same industry, so that surge and peak and everything I understand very, very well. There are opportunities to mitigate it, but it's a reality. You're going to have shift changes. You can't have everybody leave and then people stagger in over 10 minutes, half an hour, 30 minutes, and leave patients unattended. It's a different kind of ballgame. But we appreciate your creative solves in the past and challenge you to see what creative solves there are to mitigate some of this. We also noticed the difference in the count between the development text and the drawing. And so you heard Mr. Way talk about, hey, can we take those extra parking spaces and make some more green? I echo that sentiment. We want to have sufficient parking. We don't want street parking. We all agree to that. But at the same time, there's a challenge for the landscape architect to make sure that everything is integrated in a way that we lessen the impact and lessen the visibility on that asphalt. One other item on, Ms. Martin, could you bring up the sawmill elevation? I echo one of my fellow, I think it was Mr. Supelak, who talked about this particular elevation on the building. And I think that what I was missing was on the other three sides, we see all three colors represented at all three levels. And on this one, it took me a long time to actually realize the white is represented because it is so ground level. There's nothing really in that second plane. It's just the dark and the glass. So some type of vertical of the lighter color to integrate and to wrap and to give variety. Mr. Supelak said, on the other elevation, it was more planar, plain. And I see that in this one, even though there's articulation, because of the materials, it's not apparent articulation. Whereas if we had vertical, if we had some type of light massing to break up that architecture rather than it being dark, dark, dark. And we're at a disadvantage because we're looking at renderings, we're looking at, pre-plotted trees that all look alike, that have no maturity, that are all deciduous with very few evergreens in the foreground. But we appreciate everything that has gone forward thus far. We challenge you to continue to work with the community, whether that be us or staff or community members at large, as this project goes forward and as it goes into operation. So thank you for joining with us this evening. With that, I will entertain a motion. Nikki, could I have you put up I think there are 11 conditions?
Yeah, 1 second.
Thank you. One last item, just because it's been on our recent agenda. We do have the Dublin link here that is alternate transportation. Hospitals are challenging because patients aren't going to necessarily be able to choose their type of transportation as if it were a normal commercial or residential type operation. But we also just recently saw the Kaufman Mobility Hub, where we have different types of transport. Again, it's a hospital, so we have to be sensitive to the use. And
Everyone's going to ride their bike.
I don't know, that bright road trail looks pretty entertaining to me.
Okay. So yes, I've shared the 11 conditions proposed on the screen. Just want to confirm that the commission has no revisions this evening.
So commission, if I could have you start on the previous screen, and then we'll pause, let the commission verify that this covers all of the discussion items and the questions and comments this evening before moving on to page 2. Has everyone had opportunity to review the 5? Okay. Mr. Mayor,
I actually have, so on 11, it says the applicant continue to work with staff to refine the architectural character with the FDP. Can we add the architecture and landscape architecture character, or landscape character? Would that be appropriate? I'm looking at the other commissioners.
I see 3 head nods. I'm looking for a 4th. Yes, okay.
May I suggest too that maybe that's also in line with the comments that you've all made this evening? Because I think there was some good feedback that we would want to capture as part of the discussion, if that's appropriate.
Separate line item?
No, we could just add that that would be in line with the community plan and the commission's discussion. Is that fair? Okay.
I assume we heard about Mr. Way about the landscaping and so on. 2 things I noticed as I go through this, the parking, as I said, that's kind of a sticking thing with a lot of us. All the pictures, of course, have no cars in that parking lot, so it's going to look a lot different filled with cars. And number 2, it's going to look a lot different in the winter than it does in the summer. So I would encourage staff to encourage a lot of evergreens and things to make it green, year round, and make it very heavy. Because as I said, there's a lot of concrete that's going to be covered by cars. And so I think that's going to be real important.
Ms. Roush, one question. I don't remember seeing, in my former life, we used to require snow stacking as part of the parking requirements. Do we do that at all? The last 2 years have been pretty intensive as far as how long significant amount of snow pile has stayed. And some of the snow stacking that people do in, first of all, the accessible parking spaces, which, but then also toward the front of the parking lots.
Yeah, the code doesn't really address that. I would assume being a hospital, they would not probably put that in the ADA required spaces, but yeah, that's not currently addressed within our code.
Just like a fast food restaurant wouldn't stack at its drive-through.
Right.
Self-serving on their part.
Vicki, I'd be remiss if I didn't try to micromanage. Number 8, it should be update the PDP to remove or relocate.
While they're updating, and forgive me, this is not anything to do with the conditions, but maybe just a comment I failed to make earlier. That service area, and I think you're doing it already, but I'm just calling it out, right? The service area, I think you're screening pretty substantially, and we all know how that goes too. Sometimes it looks like it's a screened industrial area, and sometimes it doesn't. Obviously, for our purposes and your purposes, it would be wonderful if it kind of comes across as not, not a screened industrial area, but effectively hides it nonetheless.
Mr. Wade, does number 11 now fit? And Mr. Schneer, the typo is corrected at number 8. Any other questions or comments from commission? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
So move.
Second.
Thank you.
Mr. Way,
Yes.
Mr. Fishman,
Yes.
Mr. Supalack,
Yes.
Yes.
Ms. Call,
Yes.
Mr. Schneer.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. Thank you again to everyone in attendance on this particular item this evening. I think that we made a better product together. That is to the credit of residents, to the credit of staff, to the credit of the applicant, and my commissioners, my fellow commissioners up here today. Thank you for your time. And we certainly look forward to the next step where we get down to the Lego blocks. Thank you. All right. Do we have communications either from the commission or for staff?
The only item that I wanted to raise was the APA conference, the national conference is in San Diego, California this year, and it's going to be at the end of April. So if you have interest in going somewhere nice and warm and learning about planning a little bit further, please reach out to me and let me know if you're interested, and then we'll help coordinate some dates. So the dates are April the 30th through May the 3rd. So it's a weekend plus the 2 first days of the week.
Email.
Yeah, you'll send an email out.
Yes, I can do that. I just wanted to raise that to the group. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get an email.
Right. I mean, how can you go wrong?
All right. Do they have a published agenda or breakout session classes
Yes.
already?
I don't know if all the sessions are fully defined, but there is that up
think
now?
they are,
Okay.
yeah.
So all the information is on there
It's
so
like
you can see that.
hundreds of sessions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to look at the agenda to see if a lot of these, like the 4th day is half day or just workshops, and
they typically have
sometimes hard
options so
to
you
swing.
can pick the number of days you want to go. So you wouldn't have to be there the whole time.
The other things, they have a lot of tours, like they tour all different things to do with planning. And so those would be invaluable for commissioners to take.
I did the APA conference like 8 years ago, and it was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Mr. Fishman has been as a guest to Dublin before. In
Yeah,
New
we'll send an
Orleans.
email tomorrow with the link for the website so you can look at it, and then again, letting me know, and we'll coordinate, because that'll be flights and things like that, the hotels we'll have to deal with, so.
Perfect. All right, any other communications? All right. We are adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I think this may be a record. So thank you, everybody. Golf clap.